An acute lack of perspective. There were no shooting stars the night my older brother and I got caught taking a joyride in our father's truck. Lying on my back in the front yard, I looked to the sky. There was nothing to wish on, no hope of escape. We were busted. Randall, 13, and I, 10, pulled up to find Mom's station wagon in the driveway, home much earlier than expected. As the elder brother, Randall took the biggest share of the blame that night, but it was my fault. In my pre-adolescent desperation to be thought of as cool, I had gotten greedy. The night before, we had taken Mom's car out while both of our parents were at choir practice. The whole family had walked over to the church for Wednesday night supper and Bible study, followed by choir practice for our folks. This schedule was as dependable as the seasons, and since we lived only a few blocks from the church, Randall and I always walked home by ourselves. Neither of us had remembered to bring a key that night, so Mom had given me hers. When we rounded the corner on our street and our house came into view, the station wagon spoke to Randall. This sort of thing happened pretty frequently when we were growing up, and I had learned to read the message from the expression on his face. Someone would pass in a Corvette or Camaro, and he would smile, then grimace. "You want me," the cars were saying, "but you'll never have me." An 18-wheeler would pass, and he would squint like Clint Eastwood, about to draw his pistol in the outlawed Josie Wales. "You couldn't handle me," it was saying, and Randall would stare down his seemingly inanimate challenger. That Wednesday night, after church, the station wagon said, "Take me, I'm yours." We didn't talk about whether or not we should drive the car. It was fated, beyond our control. We just did it. The only questions were where we would go and whether I would get a turn behind the wheel. We both knew how to drive. Dad had seen to that. Living so close to the church, that big empty parking lot begging to be used on a Saturday afternoon, and Randall obsessed with cars. Dad had started teaching him the basics when he was only 8. I sat in the back seat during these early training runs. Sat is the wrong verb, really. I stood, both feet on the center hump of the drivetrain, my hands on the back of the front seat, my head craning as far up over Randall's shoulder as it would reach, and I watched every bouncing needle, every flickering dashboard light. When I turned 8, I begged and pleaded for my turn at the wheel. Randall had gotten 2, so I should too. By that point, Dad had begun to think teaching Randall to drive at such a young age hadn't been the best parenting choice he'd ever made. Randall was pressing almost every weekend to drive, not just in the parking lot, but on the neighborhood streets. I think Dad knew letting me start driving would be the first step toward turning Randall loose. His sense of fairness won out, though, and I quickly worked past the two-footed folly of the beginner and learned to stop, start, park, and drive as smooth as any boy twice my age. 2 years later, Mom's keys in my hand, I was ready for the open road, at least for a few blocks. Randall let me take the wagon down our street and make the right onto 2nd Avenue, past our church, past our Sunday school teacher Mrs. Pemberton's house, past the Get-and-Go, past Checkers Pizza and the arcade, almost half a mile, all the way to the Big Star parking lot. I pulled in, careful to stay near the street and as far from the doors as possible, in case some adult we knew might see us while walking in or out of the store. Randall and I switched places. He took the car back out onto the road and down to the number 4 stoplight at Main Street. We sat there for 10 jittery seconds, nerves dancing to the tune of Every Breath You Take on the radio, before the church van pulled up next to us in the left turn lane. Mr. Hess had rounded up the folks too old to drive and was making his post-prayer meeting rounds. I dove for the floorboard with a heartfelt, "Dookie!" I could handle the station wagon, but the fine art of swearing was still in a developmental phase. Randall didn't move. He saw them, saw me overreacting. But he didn't flinch, just kept right on with every move you make, every vow you break, like any 16-year-old with a legitimate license would have done. I couldn't see the light changing from down there, but I felt the car move as he pulled through the intersection. "Get up, you baby," he said. This was always his favorite insult. Still is, I think. "Did they see us?" "We'll find out later," he said. There was nothing we could have done if they had, but that scare took the fun out of the ride. He made a right a couple of blocks later and headed straight home. He parked the car after our 2 or 3 mile round trip, and we went to our respective rooms to wait for Mom and Dad to come in, hoping with all our might no one we knew had seen us. I huddled in my bed, my head wedged between my pillow and my radio, the latter tuned to Shotgun Stevens' WOKI broadcast. It was begging and pleading to your bleeding night, a weekly exercise in self-degradation where the person with the least self-respect, the most willingness to grovel, would be rewarded with concert tickets. That week it was Duran Duran playing Neyland Stadium. I considered calling in, tying up our phone line by dialing and redialing until I got through, but I knew even if I managed to get on the air, even if I managed to out-whine, out-whimper, and out-wail the other callers, I'd never be able to talk Mom into letting me go by myself. Going with her or Dad was too uncool to consider. I heard Mom and Dad come in that night, listened intently to the approaching footsteps with dread, but Mom just stuck her head in, told me she loved me, and wished me a good night's sleep. I didn't get one, of course, what with all the adrenaline and the memory of it. Even so, I sprang out of bed the next morning dying to get to school. I had a strong sense of the social order, and I knew what we had done was the peak of cool for my age group. No one at North Clinton Elementary had ever driven a car. No one but me, and no trip to Disney World, no Ocean Pacific outfit, no parachute pants, no Pac-Man high score would keep me from being the coolest kid in Mr. Stewart's class, probably in all of 5th grade. I dashed in, put my backpack and lunchbox under my desk, and leaned across the aisle to tell Jennifer Price first, because she was A, sitting next to me, and B, the cutest girl in my class. I didn't have the whole boy-girl thing worked out yet, but it was climbing with the priority and determination of Reinhold Messner. I blurted the whole story out in a single breath, fully expecting her eyes to light up like the flux capacitor, but instead I got the combination hair flip, eyes roll, the twin monsters of disbelief, followed by a "Yeah, sure, Marcus," delivered with enough disdain to make Prince feel ashamed. I tried to tell Carrie Finch, who sat behind me, when she came in a few seconds later, but Jennifer interrupted, told her not to believe me, and all was lost. I gave up, pulled my spelling book out of my backpack, and went to using that week's 20 words in a sentence, hoping I could at least avoid getting in trouble for not doing the homework I had skipped in favor of the joyride, which was clearly going to be more myth than legend. That afternoon, Randall and I got home and learned Mom and Dad would be going out for the evening with the Garners, a new couple from the choir. We hadn't had a babysitter for over a year by then, half because Mom and Dad had decided we were too old for that sort of thing, and half because we had so frightened the last one they weren't able to get the young girls at the church to take the job. The last poor girl had come home from college for the Christmas holidays and ended up at our house wearing a new coat. She was terribly proud of the fact the sleeves could be zipped out to make it into one of those puffy vests that were so popular at the time. Randall and I each got one of those sleeves and proceeded to beat her with them. She fled the living room. We chased her through the house, swatting away, until she locked herself in our parents' bedroom. To us, it was just a new and interesting form of pillow fighting. To her, we were told during a stern talk from Mom, It had been a terrifying attack by dangerous, vicious boys. It's all about perspective, really. And we were grounded for 2 weeks in the hope that we would gain some. We did not.